The moment you step inside your house and turn the key, your situational awareness flatlines. You cross that threshold, hear the click of the lock, and your brain instantly tells you that you are entirely separated from the outside world. For a 14-year-old hanging out by himself on a Friday night, that separation meant settling into a dark bedroom to play video games. His parents were out late, he had paid the delivery guy for a pizza, and he was relaxing in a perfectly quiet house. But a physical barrier requires a human to secure it. When he brought that pizza inside, he closed the front door, but he didn't turn the latch. He left a zero-friction breach point right at the perimeter. An hour later, the silence broke. The downstairs door creaked open. There were no keys jingling, no text from his parents, only the heavy, deliberate sound of footsteps crossing the floor, reaching the bottom of the stairs, and methodically climbing up toward the second floor. He sat completely frozen in his gaming chair. His bedroom door was cracked open about a foot. The footsteps paused right outside his room. A figure stepped into the sliver of open space, lingered in the darkness, and then, for reasons completely unknown, turned around and walked back down the stairs. We treat our homes like passive shields. In reality, they are fragile, active systems. All it takes is one broken habit, a single unlatched door, and the entire secure perimeter dissolves, leaving the center totally exposed. Brute forcing a locked apartment door draws attention and makes a lot of noise. Instead of fighting the hardware, some intruders bypass it entirely by attacking human psychology. At 1 p.m, an apartment resident heard a knock. Outside stood 2 men in maintenance uniforms. One held a toolbox, the other held an air filter. They said they were there to do a quick swap. The resident didn't remember an email about it, but the prop was entirely mundane, so he let them in. The men walked into the bedroom. A minute later, the resident heard the apartment door open and shut. He assumed both men had left, unaware that he'd only heard one of them exit. While one man walked out the front door, the other stayed behind, slipping into the bedroom closet. The intruder waited in the dark, relying on the high probability that a resident will eventually step out for an afternoon errand and leave the unit empty. The plan failed because of a random deviation in the resident's schedule. At 5 o'clock, he did leave, but only to drop a bag down the hallway trash chute. He returned 60 seconds later to find the hidden man standing in his living room. Caught completely off guard by the shortened timeline, the intruder panicked and fled. A simple prop and a generic uniform hijacked the resident's threat detection system. The intruders didn't pick a lock. They weaponized our societal programming to be polite to people who look like they belong. When deception isn't an option and an intruder meets a secured door, they have to pivot. They start stress testing the perimeter to find the path of least resistance. A man renting a house in a quiet neighborhood was cooking late one night when someone knocked on his front door. He checked the window and saw a man with his hood pulled tight over his face. Preferring to interact with a stranger at 9 at night, he ignored the knock and a subsequent doorbell ring, assuming the guy would eventually give up. 5 minutes later, the front step was empty, but the intruder hadn't left. He was escalating. He moved away from the public-facing street, slipping around the boundary line and into the enclosed private backyard. The resident was back to cooking when a figure suddenly appeared right outside the kitchen window. The hooded man looked directly at him through the glass and knocked on the pane. He had bypassed the exterior buffer zone to force a direct, highly intimidating confrontation. The resident retreated to the living room, and the intruder seemingly vanished. But 4 hours later, at 1 a.m, the man returned, walking through the backyard and making a direct line for the kitchen window again. This time, the resident called the police, who caught the man trespassing in the yard. These encounters show a methodical progression. The intruder probes the edges, gauges the response, and applies continuous pressure until they find a path inside. The most comforting narrative we tell ourselves about an intrusion is that the perpetrator is a faceless stranger, someone who crosses into our world for a few terrifying minutes and then disappears back into the night. A homeowner who had recently relocated to Oregon heard his back door open on his 3rd night in the house. He walked toward the dining room and heard footsteps quickly retreat. He looked out the side window and got a remarkably clear look at a man with messy brown hair briskly walking away. A few days passed. The homeowner was out front doing yard work. A man walking down the street stopped, offered a warm smile, and politely asked if he had recently moved into the neighborhood. The homeowner recognized the messy brown hair instantly. The friendly guy asking about the neighborhood was the exact same man who had opened his back door a few nights earlier. He lived right down the street, using broad daylight and a casual greeting as camouflage. This creates immediate psychological paralysis. Even though the homeowner knew exactly who he was looking at, deep-seated social conditioning makes it incredibly difficult to accuse a smiling, chatty neighbor of a felony without airtight proof. The man conversed for a minute, then casually strolled away. Proximity is a highly effective shield. The most persistent threats don't have to travel across town to breach your walls. They operate comfortably on your own street, hiding in plain sight. There is a specific anomaly connecting these 4 separate events. Not a single punch was thrown, and absolutely zero property was stolen. Every intruder walked away empty-handed. Yet the damage was massive. The physical structures of these homes remained intact, but the sense of security that makes a house a home had been hollowed out. That loss alters behavior for years. The 14-year-old stopped staying home alone at night for a long time after that shadow paused at his door. The Oregon resident installed cameras immediately, but eventually packed up and moved entirely to avoid living down the street from the man who opened his back door. Fences, deadbolts, and peepholes are excellent tools, but they provide an illusion of absolute certainty. A lock can't think for you, and a fence can't vet the person wearing a maintenance uniform. A home's resilience depends on the vigilant mindset you maintain every time you decide who gets to step across the threshold.